All right, we'll start out by wishing everybody a Happy New Year. Hope you had a good holiday. Remind people that in the audience that you'll have a chance to talk during public comment, but not during the meeting, please. And we did get notification that Jalen is not going to be attending tonight, so he did let us know in advance. So we will kick it off by going into our first discussion item, which I'll let Mike introduce, which is the CIP bond millage potential reduction and PA 33.
Thank you, Mayor. So as you guys know, over the past couple months, we've been starting this discussion regarding budget and what we're going to do due to Headley failing. We know we've had conversations about reducing some services right now. We know police is off the table, and there's been hesitation regarding canceling library contracts. So now we're at the point where we're starting to get creative with our financing for this next year. So Michelle and I have been looking at this, and luckily with the call in a couple weeks around the holidays, we were able to dive into this a little bit. So now, next year, you guys know, in 2021, the residents approved a capital improvement bond that helped us do a bunch of infrastructure projects. That bond came with an established millage rate of 3.9307. Over the past few years, that millage has actually collected more than what is due on the bond. So those extra funds sits its own capital improvement account. It's just been kind of rolling over the past few years. With that, that money can't be spent on anything else besides the bond. So our options when we're looking at this, we could either do what we're recommending here and reduce it by $500,000 this next year, and then potentially go PA 33 route so residents have limited impact on millage, or we just let it roll as is and we could potentially pay this bond off early in 2030 versus 2031. So this conversation today is just kind of get a feel for how you guys see this, what you guys think, and if this is an avenue you guys want to explore further.
Yeah, with a savings of 32.
Yeah, and if we paid it off early, you'd save $30,000 in interest. But that's also 5 years down the road.
Right.
Yeah.
So
there's no real direct impact on next year's budget, really, other than potentially collecting $500,000 less.
yeah, so if take PA 33 away right now. So for this, we'd still probably recommend, if you don't do PA 33, we'd probably just say, let's keep rolling with this, pay it off early. Because this literally is just for bond payments. Bond payments, interest, goes to nothing else. Mm-hmm. So the option is you either reduce at $500,000 and we start just chipping away at the fund balances currently there. It's just a benefit to the residents as you're paying $500,000 less, or you just keep rolling with it as is. Now, if you bring PA 33 in the picture, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, why don't you go into that? Because
Yeah.
I mean, the two topics are so interrelated. So why don't you introduce that? And then
So
we can...
since it's all millage related, we all know we pay taxes. So our argument is essentially, hey, if we're going to reduce this by $500,000, let's bring PA 33 back into the picture, and you can either do $1,000,000 or $500,000. If you do $500,000,
It's a wash.
It's a wash. If you do $1,000,000, that naturally reduces budget pressures overall, and it does bring down the millage that we paid this past year for everyone by 1.5. Now it doesn't get back to those FY 24-25 levels, but it's still $1.5 million less than this current fiscal year. So we're just trying to get a feel from you guys, if you guys want to explore this more, if you like this idea a little bit, because that's going to lead us internally how we're going to approach budget.
I had a quick question about the 1 mil, because do we have room under the Headley constraints to actually call for a PA 33 1?
Yeah.
PA 33, you can do essentially anything you want up to 10. So this past year, Finance Review Committee recommended 3.1, because that was going to be the delta of what Headley would have been. Council ultimately ended up with only going 2. So PA 33, you have a lot of flexibility with what you can set.
Yeah, actually, it's 10 for operations and 10 for capital. So some cities actually who are trying to establish a department can do up to 20. But we're not.
No, I get that. I didn't think we were allowed to use it to bypass the Headley amount.
Yep.
We can.
Well, it's not bypassing the Headley amount. It's
Well, the Headley rollback amount.
Right.
Well, a Public Act 33 millage would provide additional revenue that would go towards paying for public safety services.
Right. No,
So then that
understand.
money wouldn't have to come out of the general fund.
Right.
So that money in the general fund could be used to offset other costs that the city has to pay for.
Okay, well, obviously we didn't know that for a fact, but okay, let's move forward then with that assumption for now.
Yeah. Any thoughts?
thoughts. I don't love the idea of using Public Act 33 again after have the override vote. I think the message is sent pretty clear, like taxes need to go down.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, it's either leave it as it is and just, continue to pay off the bond early, or reduce the millage rate, but just have that benefit be a reduced tax to the residents.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I'm similar to you. I mean, the 1 mil PA 33, I would find very difficult, considering I stood up in front of a room 17 different times and said that, if this didn't pass, the question was, well, would council do a PA 33? And, I said this then, and I still believe it now. If the residents told us that, whether for whatever reason they voted against Headley, they told us no. And so we would then be going against their wishes, which I would have a hard time doing. I could consider, I don't know, I'd have to think about it, but I can consider the half-half, right? So if we get rid of take the half out of the SIP bond and put a half mil PA 33, it's net neutral to the residents, but again, it's still, in some way, it still feels like we're going against what the residents said. So, but obviously we've got to do something, because we said no to the library, we said no to the police.
If that's the case, I need you guys to start making firm decisions and cutting services.
Right.
Then.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because as you guys know, over the past couple months, we've been dragging our feet, specifically on one big ticket item.
Yeah, and the question that I have about that too is, and I think you and I had a discussion about this at one point. Your estimate was $200,000 to $250,000 before any capital improvements, right? And so I guess the elephant in the room question is what capital improvements, are critical, and what will we be foregoing? Because, is the real number we need to get to closer to 300 or 350,000, or so.
And there's a good chance, and that we kicked off capital improvement stuff with staff today.
Right.
So naturally, if you want to look at a capital improvement plan from last year, you can look at last year's budget to see what we cut out initially. So that's a good start. We're working on capital right now. We just started that today.
I mean, I think it'd be good if at the next study session, if you could give us a list of the things that you think are critical and the price tag associated with those, because that'll help us figure out what the actual delta is. I mean,
It'll also be helpful to understand what was included in last year's capital improvement plan, but then was cut, and is now in this year's one, and what items would be net new, but also high priority, right? Because maybe there's something that's newer, that wasn't on last year's plan, but is a higher priority and needs to be addressed. So all that said, we need to start making some decisions around how are we going to close this budget gap. Again, like I said, I don't love the idea of using the Public Act 33, but I would support this idea of net neutral, like a half mil decrease in the millage rate for the capital improvement bond in the Public Act 33 of a half mil. It's the same amount of money, actually. Like in the note, in the memo, it's $1.5 million less than what residents paid for the current fiscal year.
Right.
So it's a reduction compared to the current fiscal year, and helps to close some part of the budget gap.
yeah, because right now, chipping is at 70,000. Not hiring the one open officer position is 100,000, so that's at 170. If we did that, that's a half a mil, and so that's another 80.
Yep.
85, something like that. So we're at 250. And then there's capital improvements to be considered on top of that.
I would be open to that.
Yeah, I would consider it.
Yeah, I would consider, and I don't know how you test this, so it might just be moved, but given the public's response to the police question, you have to weigh that in as well as the vote. But I think there's at least some sentiment that if they know money's going for PA 33 and public safety, they're more amenable to it than just increasing the budget.
Right.
And if that's and again, I don't know how you test for that, because we had an actual vote, but it wasn't positioned quite that way. So I wouldn't take it completely off the table. I'm with you. I feel like the voters said lower taxes, or not higher anyway. But I'm just putting that out there, that there is a difference, I think, in perception with money that's under the PA 33. And again,
Yeah.
that's mostly anecdotal, so I don't know, do we wanna bet on that or not, but at least consider it as we get, more and more hard choices. I mean, we're talking about chipping now as though it's a done deal, and we know that even chipping has a vocal
Right.
support, so we're gonna have to do things, and, I wouldn't, I guess I'm just saying, if we really had the capacity for one, personally, I'd be willing to entertain that longer before we say absolutely not. And I think the net neutral makes a lot of sense right now, and I hate to bill the city $32,000 in the future, but we're looking at these things.
Right.
So that's my 2 cents on it.
What's your,
One second. So
Yeah,
we're just talking about the possibility of cutting a half mil out of the SIP road millage, because we're collecting too much money, and offsetting that with a half mil PA 33, so it'd be net neutral to the residents, but would raise another 85,000 for us. Sorry, go ahead.
so one of the other things that's mentioned in the mail, in this memo, other than shipping services, is the currently unfilled patrol position.
Correct, yeah.
So, I don't know, it's a good look, perception, again, of raising, a millage via Public Act 33 for public safety, and then having perceived reduction in service by cutting a patrol position.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a conflict there, so.
Right.
you have to-
That said, the
But-
patrol position is currently not filled, like there isn't
Right.
anybody in it, so.
Right.
It's not like we're cutting a actual person, it wouldn't actually change the service being currently delivered, because there's no person to deliver it in that
Right.
position right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, to go back to what you were saying before, saying that there's a litmus test for that, and one of the things a lot of cities have done is they've done public safety millages, and
Yeah.
those tend to pass.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, that's one of the things we had talked about in the committee, the finance committee, about doing instead of a heavy override.
I mean, just thinking out loud here, but we could potentially consider pairing some effort along those lines with considering it for the, we're gonna do this in 2027, but we're also going to put this up, for future consideration or vote.
Right, which
I don't-
kind of leads into the whole library thing, because, regardless of, one of the things that was in there is whether or not we do a library millage, and whether we move forward on that, because that's gonna take,
It
takes a while.
Takes a couple months.
Yeah.
It's not as in-depth as a charter amendment or
Right.
anything like that, but it does still take a couple meetings.
Right, but I mean, regardless, I was thinking about this, regardless of what we hear back from Southfield, it might make sense to just move forward with that, because we can always cancel it and not do it. But, if Southfield were to release us, like we had asked them, then we can switch over to Berkeley, and we have to get an immediate $25,000 savings that adds to this, helps us out with the problem. And if they don't release us, we're gonna need money anyways to pay for the $190,000 that we have to pay them next year, so we could still go forward with a library millage. So that's something to consider as well. And that could potentially help us out with the delta that we have.
Can you restate that, because I'm not clear on what you're proposing?
Okay. Well, I'm not proposing, I'm just saying, so one of the things Mike suggested is possibly doing a library millage.
Yeah.
And we've been saying as a group that we wanted to wait to hear what Southfield comes back and says, whether or not they'll.
No, it was a library millage, even if Southfield came back and said no or yay.
Right, I
Yeah.
agree with you, I
So,
think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
No,
Okay. Well,
no, what I was saying is, we, at our last study session, we said we didn't wanna take any action and move forward, because we wanted to hear what Southfield had to say. And so all I'm saying is if Southfield comes back and tells us, we're not gonna release you, well, we move forward with a library millage. If Southfield says we're gonna release you, well, then we can immediately go to Berkeley, save $25,000, and still do a library millage to cover the cost of the library.
Oh, then I wasn't understanding that.
Yeah, I may have explained it
I didn't-
poorly.
No, I'm saying I didn't understand it, period. I
Yeah.
thought that the library millage was going to be something to go towards the residents to say whether or not they wanted to have access to library services,
In general,
period.
yeah.
Not just because it was not, originally when it was first given to us, it wasn't an option of going to a different library. It was about losing the library,
Right.
period.
Altogether.
And And then that's when Berkeley came up, and I think that my thoughts is if there's more people that don't want to be in it, period, where we don't have to worry about losing any services at all, I think that would be more advantageous to let the residents vote on whether or not they want library services at all.
Mhm.
That's what I thought that we were.
Yeah, no, I agree with you in terms of the library millage, like, having a vote that is voted up,
Mhm.
right, by the residents, sends clear indication we wanna have, we're willing to have this much tax money put aside specifically for that service, and then that's just, now it's, that's enshrined, right? It can't be touched or utilized for any other service.
Mhm.
It has no impact on the operating revenue of the city. I think that's something that should be put on the ballot the next opportunity we get, in any case.
Right.
I agree.
Right. So that's kind of what I was saying in a roundabout way, is regardless of what happens with Southfield, we should be moving forward
Okay.
with the library. So do we
But
want
then you
to?
were saying something about backing out of it, and I didn't understand backing out of
Well,
what?
because one of the things, we asked Southfield we asked them two questions. One, can we back out early? Because if we tell them we want to cancel the contract, we can't leave until a year from July. So we wanted to ask, well, will you allow us to leave now? That was the original question that we had asked way back when. And then we also wanted to ask them whether or not, if we backed out, would they sell residents individual memberships?
I thought you said something about canceling something, I thought you meant cancel, okay,
No.
then I didn't hear you right.
If we put a library millage on a ballot, could the language be tied to a specific library system? Or,
That'd probably be a bigger question, but
I didn't see.
or not, or could you leave it so it's just a library millage that can be utilized to pay for services from
I
any
think it's a-
library in the
it's-
city?
it's just for a
For a
library.
library.
It's gonna be,
not for.
yeah, it's gonna be vague, because if we did wanna move to Berkeley, we'd probably.
So
still-
the reason I ask this is because it could impact how people vote, right? If people are voting in support of a library millage because they wanna retain Southfield library services, right? Then they may not support it if it doesn't explicitly state this would go towards library services from Southfield. Potentially, I don't know,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And also, I
But
mean,
go back to what Kelly was saying, it's like, we really want a referendum on, are residents willing to support paying for a library?
period,
Period.
regardless of which city the
Right.
service
Well,
comes from.
and then the millage is gonna be, the request is gonna be for the amount for Southfield,
Right.
not for Berkeley anyway.
Right, so if
That's
we
what I
ask,
would think.
Right, well, they were talking about a 1 mil library
Right.
millage, which is about the cost of the Southfield
Southfield.
So,
library.
of course, I mean, I would assume that meant that the millage is for Southfield.
Southfield.
Yeah.
right,
And
yeah.
then
if
the
it passes-
options are at least potentially there for a no vote.
Yeah, oh, sure,
Right.
it's always a possibility, either way.
No, I'm sorry. What I mean is, a Berkeley option, for instance, would be something that would potentially be considered, but only if there was a no vote. Because if we're voting for the Southfield one and it passes, then.
Well,
Just-
this is the tricky part, because we don't get to choose, we're asking to get out of the contract. Let's say that we get out of the contract.
Yeah.
And the library millage passes, and now we have the money. If we go back to Southfield and say, oh, now we wanna be in this contract again, they might say, great, but it's twice the cost.
Right, well, and that's the other issue too, is that, okay, so if we ask for 1 mil, which is what we're currently paying Southfield, remember, that contract is only in existence for another 4 years. So in 4 years, that price is gonna go way up, because they've been trying to hit us up for years to get more money from us, and we've always just said, well, we've got a contract. And if we looked at what we got back from some of the other library systems, they're charging way more than we're getting charged by Southfield.
Yeah, it is a delicate
Yeah.
thing, because there's a lot of risk involved with trying to end the contract early.
What's a potential timing for a millage vote?
August.
Yeah, August would be the earliest, realistically at that point. You might as well just wait till November, when it's a general election, you get more people turn out. Because an August election, no matter how it votes, you're not gonna see that money until next summer anyways, so do the bigger election.
You're more likely to have better participation in November.
Yeah, get a better decision.
Unfortunately, because you're putting yourself in a position of having to let them know that you're canceling.
Let's say,
Right, 'cause
it's
we
one of those
can't-
things, you take the risk, either ask them to cancel or
Well, we asked him, did we ask them, how did we position, did we ask them, if canceling was an
Yeah,
option?
getting out was.
Right now,
Right.
that's all we've
Yeah,
got.
because
Right.
we've tabled the past
But
couple
that-
meetings of formally canceling.
That July deadline though would have come before the, and that, which would then, you're suggesting would open up the contract for renegotiation.
Or we don't cancel it because we're worried about losing the contract, and now we're
Right.
on the hook for at least
Right, I
another
know,
year,
I know.
whether the library village gets passed or not.
Right, right, it's.
Creates an even
I know,
more
right.
budgetary pressure
Yeah.
on the general budget.
So you make it for a mill, which could pay for Southfield if they didn't want that budget hole. They might take us back at that amount, or we'd have enough to go somewhere else.
We'd have
Again,
a
if
good
it
down
passed.
payment
Yeah,
to go
okay.
somewhere else. And at that point, then Berkeley maybe is an option. If Southwick comes back with double the cost,
Right.
then we're kind of in the same situation, but at
Yeah.
least we have
Some
a
money.
foundation of some money to help provide that service to the residents.
And if the library millage were voted down, then potentially we could get library services paid for out of the general fund from a less expensive system like Berkeley.
Right,
But-
Would have the benefit
Depends
of
on how
the-
you do the wording also
Yeah.
though, because
Yeah,
if
it
your
does.
wording says that, the residents aren't willing to pay for it, do you even look for library services, or do you have the residents look for library services,
On
you
their
know,
own.
individually, yeah.
That's a great point.
which
So-
we saw was an option,
And
so.
so I think that is gonna be in the, verbiage on, and that's a Baker question.
Yeah.
And I think that should, personally, I think that should be that should be clear in there, whether or not you want it at all, you know.
But to both your points, it seems like we should start
Right,
looking at drafts and, cause it's gonna be complicated.
right, so that was gonna be my next question, is do you wanna have Mike start the process?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes, please.
all right, so that's one issue, but then we still have the other issue to kinda,
To go back.
and say, you know, what do we, you know, what's our thoughts on the, you know, reduction of a half mil versus just continuing to collect the money and pay it off a year early, or offset that half mil with a half mil PA 33 or a 1 mil PA 33.
Yeah, I think it's a horrible look.
Yeah.
That said, we have to make difficult and not necessarily popular or nice-looking decisions given the budgetary constraints that we currently are under.
And it's a slightly better look than a 2 mil PA 33, which you had to do for, you know what I'm saying?
Right, to
So, I mean,
fix last year's gap.
it's showing directionally, if not, you know, I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I don't know, I don't know that I could support a 1 mil personally, PA 33.
Yeah.
Half mil I would consider.
Yeah.
And, you know, if we did that, that would get us at least to, you know, what you're estimating for next year, not including capital improvements. Yeah, I mean, are there other ideas in terms of other cuts that we could take that might not be?
This naturally, we're trying big ticket stuff. I don't start nickel and diming like I
Right.
mentioned in my memo until these next couple months. So based off this, I think I'm going to start building the draft budgets how I did this past year, with options, half mil, 1 mil, and nothing, and kind of go from there.
Right, so nothing would be a lot more cuts of the
Yeah.
individual line items,
Yeah.
and whereas, okay.
So the other part of the memo note is about the chipping services and the patrol position. So these example budgets assume that we're cutting chipping services and the patrol position?
Those are going to be my recommendations as of right now. Yeah.
And let's not forget the staff salary freeze too.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, please look that up.
And currently that additional police car is not on the budget either, correct?
As of right now, no.
Correct.
Say lucky. They got an accident in like May, so we got insurance to cover the majority of the cost of the one that you guys approved. So as of right now, no. But we're gonna see. We still got a few more months of a lot of miles and engine hours on the vehicle, so we'll see. Don't
Few more months of what?
of engine hours and miles on some vehicles.
Yeah,
so.
the cars are gonna get driven, they might break down.
And
it's possible.
realistically, when you see the CIP, a police vehicle's gonna be there. There's always gonna be one because it should be replaced every. In an ideal world, since we have 5 vehicles, one should be replaced every single year. Cop vehicles have like that 5 to 6 year life cycle. So they should be replaced yearly, but we know in small cities it's very tough just due to the cost. But we'll see how the next couple months plays out budget wise.
All right, so move forward with the library millage, and then you'll put together kind of the a la carte budget like you did last time.
Yep.
Okay. Any other comments from anyone on this? Okay, what do we got next? Communication and Engagement Committee. So, I think the idea here was to talk about how we want to set up the Communication and Engagement Committee. I know Mike included the current draft copy that we have that Jason has been working on with Mike on the communication plan, but and I know John, we got it in front of us, John did a good start at a mission statement. So you know, we need to begin talking about that. I mean, I'm trying to find my notes here. Yeah, so somebody give me their thoughts on the matter while I'm looking for my notes. I have them somewhere.
I think we should start with the mission statement.
Yeah. So my thought was that it should be short, the mission statement. You know, this is largely designed, in my thoughts, to entice people to come be on the committee, and sort of give them a good direction of what our priorities are in forming this. I do think there's some difference, and not that they wouldn't necessarily touch all of these things eventually, but that, you know, things like emergency communications and things like that probably are under the, you know, city management has a plan, and they're probably not gonna be touching that anytime soon, if ever, but so I was just thinking along what our priorities were in terms of increased engagement, increased reach of communications, et cetera. So it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if you wanna, I know it wasn't in the packet, I apologize for that, but I could read it, or.
Yeah, I mean, especially now we're
Yeah.
recording the session,
Yeah,
would be a good
okay.
idea.
Sure. All right, and again, this is just a draft, and again, with the idea of giving people a sense of what they'd be in for, and what our goals are. So it just a Communications and Engagement Committee mission statement. The Lathrup Village City Council created the Communications and Engagement Committee to review how the city of Lathrup Village communicates with its residents, businesses, and community partners, and to advise the city council and probably the city on ways to improve those communications, city communications. Through research, review of current practices, and gathering community feedback, the committee, in coordination with the council and city management, will explore and recommend improvements to support the following goals, and I have 3 goals here. Improve the clarity, accessibility, timeliness, and reach, so just general improvement of all those things. To strengthen public understanding of city activities, decisions, and processes. You know, I do think there's a lot of, just even from my time here versus there's a lot of places where better understanding would lead to, you know, better understanding. And then third, encourage greater participation in public meetings, civic processes, and community events. And then just so it's not a committee that's out there, you know, without any sort of guardrails or whatever, that they would also recommend appropriate metrics for evaluating progress toward these goals, which could include things such as participation levels, the use of our city communication channels, like email, website, et cetera, the social media, and then community feedback reflecting improved understanding and engagement.
Yeah.
Fairly simple, straightforward.
Great.
I know.
I mean, cause I was reviewing the draft plan.
Yeah.
We have there. And it, you know, it goes in a lot more detail, but like this covers the intention.
Right.
The intent of the mission of establishing a formal communications plan. Hadn't thought about it, but the suggestion to include metrics.
Yeah.
To evaluating the progress and success of the communication plan is really important.
You know, one thing I'd add, I like it, the one thing I'd add on the first paragraph, last sentence, I'd just like to see it'd say improve city communication and engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, I
that
think-
is what it is for, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the things that I've been frustrated with the last 8 years is that, you know, there's communication, and there's examples of where there was lots of communication, but no engagement.
Yeah.
And then, you brought up
Yeah.
no, that's a bad, the example I was gonna give was a bad example, never mind, never mind.
Yeah,
But yeah, but you know what I mean,
Yeah,
so,
100%,
yeah.
so.
Yeah, I was thinking, in terms of what deliverables might be from the committee, and some of the things I was thinking about was one would be a recommendation for the communication plan, so building on what, you've already established, and I know we said that you were gonna be an advisor to the committee to work and putting that together, to bring that to council. And then I also thought that a couple other things that could come out of that would be, which I think is different, recommendations for improving communication, because the communication plan is gonna be, how do we communicate, who does the communication, and what circumstances, things like that. Whereas, recommendations to improve communication has kind of, to me at least, has a little bit of a different feel. And then same thing with respect to engagement. Okay, so now we have engagement. What are some ideas that we have to improve engagement? Do we have block captains? We talked about that in the past, or quadrant captains. Things like that we could do to improve engagement. So just off the top of my head, I was thinking about maybe a few different deliverables from the committee over time.
I think that this mission statement captures
All that.
what we need to do in order to form the committee.
Okay.
And then I think it's the committee's responsibility, with feedback from the council and the city manager and staff, to drive what the deliverables
Yeah.
of the committee will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think we should be
Yeah, so I'm
defining
getting ahead.
that now.
Getting ahead. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's tempting.
Yeah.
But I think you're absolutely right, that's how the committee should run it. We have to put that responsibility back on them, so. But I certainly agree with your outline, and
Yeah.
I hope that's.
Yeah, I wrote down a whole bunch of things, but then I realized, I'm
Yeah.
getting into the weeds.
Yeah.
All right.
Save those notes.
I've
for
got them
once the
saved.
committee
Yeah.
is established.
I've got them saved. Yeah.
So are we in a position to, we formed a committee in theory, but did we say how many people would be on it, or,
That
any
was
of
gonna be
those
my
things?
next
Yes,
question,
yeah.
for how many people, what is the structure gonna look like, when are you gonna put it out to the public to get people to join it? The, application needs to be updated to put that committee, unless there's a line item on the application that says you can fill in whatever committee you wanna join. That was a question, but it wasn't formed in the
Yeah,
manner
no,
of the
that,
question.
just the new year has to get updated anyways. That's gonna be my question too. It's how many people do you,
Right.
naturally you guys can realistically decide to say your next meeting, whether it's 5, 7, or, but it's always good to know going in, like, hey, we're gonna take
I mean,
5 folks.
I think one argument for more than a few would just be, if we're trying to hit different demographics and different areas, et cetera, it'd be great if we could, you don't know who's gonna apply, but that you could have a representative group. But that'll, if they're all from the same quadrant and they're all the same age, I guess we'd be stuck with that, but, ideally, we would have a group to
Are
choose
you
from.
saying that to, do it from quads, or, I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Oh, I wasn't even thinking that, I was just thinking we'd have it open, but that's an interesting.
I was just trying to get
I was
clarification
just
on what you were
saying the more people we have up to a point, the better chance we have of getting a representative group, old people and
Yeah.
young people.
Or heterogeneous instead of homogeneous.
Yeah. But again, you don't want it to be too big, because it's hard to run a committee that big.
I
Yeah.
think that, most of the committees started out with 5, and then you can go from there to see if it's a need to
Yeah,
increase it. Now, the question is it 5 including the liaisons from the city council, or is it 5 people separate from the people from council? And is it going to be a voting, it's gonna be voting, but are the, representatives from council included in the voting?
So, forgive me for this, but I just got back from my municipal training, and it definitely was, the lean there was, and I'm not even sure it was a lean, the suggestion was that council not be a voting member. And I think that's probably appropriate, but with that in mind, I would say the 5, if it's 5, should be in addition to
I agree.
Jason.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I agree on both those points. I think there should be 5
Yeah.
committee members, the liaison from council, advisor, that's what we decided on, and neither the liaison or the advisor should be voting. Just the
Yeah.
5
Right,
members.
okay,
just
yeah,
the
I
5
thought you
appointed
just said
committee
the opposite,
members.
right, yeah, yeah.
I agree with that. Can it just, because it's relevant, I did bring up in, I think, the new business version of city council, being to the regular meeting, just this idea, and I don't know if it's worth pursuing or not, that maybe we should look at the size of Parks and Rec, because they do have sort of 2 pretty big, goals here, with the events and also with parks, and did we wanna potentially open that up to more people so that they have more labor and et cetera? And I don't know if they even want that, it's just something that,
We prefer.
Yeah, I'd say we could talk to them about it
Yeah.
next meeting, but I just want you to remember last time we had Parks and Rec applications, we only got 1 applicant, a person of interest, and we had.
well, maybe that's a challenge for the communications committee then, it's hard to know what's the chicken, what's the egg there. I think there's interest in Parks and Rec, I really do, I understand you haven't seen that, in applications, et cetera. Maybe with the elections and everything else going on, people's attention was elsewhere, but, just based, again, on hearing what the former Parks and Rec, well, I guess some of them were former, but, they seem to have a real need for additional help. If the committee was bigger, maybe that would be helpful.
Yeah, I would start that conversation at their meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Get the results
All
and
right.
bring it back
Yeah,
in here.
That's why I said I know what the procedure is, but I think it'd be worth bringing up.
I think on average, most of our committees most of our committees are at 5. And
Yeah.
that I think that one, like what they're saying, the Parks and Rec, and every committee is within its own, has its own guidelines of how many people they want on there.
Yeah.
And I think if they want more labor, if somebody wants to be a part of Parks and Rec, you don't have to sit on the board. You can still be a part of the committee. But I definitely think that should be a conversation with that particular committee.
Okay.
Same thing's true for the communication and engagement
Yeah.
committee, right?
Yeah.
If we have tons of interest and a bunch of
Yeah.
people applying, maybe we keep it at 5 anyway, because
Yeah.
it's manageable, but when we encourage the other, people who maybe who weren't appointed but applied to participate in the meetings, to just have their input be considered, even if they're not voting on the result.
Yeah, and I think that, making it clear how volunteers can interact with committees would be another useful thing for everybody. I mean, I'm sure it's out there, but, again, I think there's at least some perception that you're either on the committee or you're not on the committee, and if there's that opportunity you're talking about, Kelly, then I think, it'd be great. I think you get more people to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I know, like, from my own personal experience, like when I first moved to the city, I was curious about
Yeah.
what was going on in the committees, but I never felt like, either I was just nervous in my own brain, and feeling self-conscious and not wanting to participate, or unclear that I was welcomed
Yeah.
to participate. And then the more you get engaged, the more you figure out that engagement's always welcome, but it's,
Right.
it's not so easy for somebody who isn't already engaged to
I mean,
engage. So-
just as a general note, one of my thoughts about Headley and some of the things we've been discussing is that it would, and I don't know, what actions we can take as a council, but just in general, that the city's rightly going to need more volunteerism. And we have a good history of volunteerism,
Mhm.
but I think given the parameters that we're working under, if there's still things, Children's Garden is a great example. That's something seems like people value, but we're gonna have to figure out a way to get higher engagement on that level, so.
Right. And I think I mentioned one of the previous meetings, the rec committee is talking about taking over the children's garden
Right.
and the community garden. So-
Right. But again, that's sort of an administrative taking over. They're
Right,
gonna
but we're gonna need
obviously
volunteers,
somebody
sure.
to do that stuff.
Yeah.
I
Sure.
think- Yeah, so, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Do we wanna, include in this appeal for applicants for this committee, skills and experience that we would desire in applicants? Like, how explicit do we wanna be with what we're looking for in terms of the applicants for this
Well,
committee.
I would hope they would tailor the resume to show
Yeah,
the communications.
but we have to make the appeal.
Right.
So should the appeal include, if the desired candidates have these experiences? And I'm thinking about this from both perspectives. One is it provides some kind of a prompt for people who might be interested. Oh, I have that skill and would want to throw my hat in the ring. But it could also potentially discourage people who don't have those skills from applying it. But it's really beneficial.
I'd say that's the unique aspect of this committee. You want to engage people, but you also don't want to push certain people away. I think
Right.
if you're not a PR professional, don't bother.
Right.
How did
So-
we do the other ones?
It depends. For example, like planning commission, you have straight up guidelines where we're pretty much pulling out
But
all
that's
of
the planning,
Yeah.
the reason I separate the planning commission, cause that's something that that's charter, we have to have it. For these ad hoc
Yeah,
committees,
like
what
Parks
have,
and
like,
Rec, we kept it very vague. It's, hey, tell us, use your letter of interest to tell us why you want to serve the city and what you're interested in this is.
Yeah, I could see too, as we consider applicants, because obviously if you are a communications person and you're attracted to this, you'll let us know that part. But if you're not, and you're just somebody who's really interested in improving this, we might want a mix of those types of people. You know, so I think it's okay to leave it vague.
What about, we've brought up twice now, this idea of block captains in this meeting?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right, and we want engagement from each of the quote-unquote 4 quadrants bisected by Southfield Road and 696. Like, do we wanna include a prompt in the appeal that indicates that we would like representation from?
Could they just indicate where they're from?
Of course they
Yeah,
can.
I mean,
Well, their address is gonna be on there, and that
Yeah.
could be something we can consider in our deliberation in terms of take this person from here, this person from here.
So the only thing I'm thinking is if in the initial appeal, we indicate something along the lines of, you know, the city would like to have participation from people that live in all parts of the city, and then a week or two before the application deadline, we see we don't have any applicants for one part of the city, then, you know, provides us with an opportunity either through the e-newsletter or, you know, direct engagement to go and appeal to people that live in that section of the city to apply.
I see value in that. I would like to be able to weigh that, but also weigh if they're old and young and marketing professionals and et cetera. But as we talk about this it seems like we should start laying down a little, like, do we give the quadrants names for future, like, I mean, we keep talking about having either 5 or 4, and I'm just saying, do we want to start laying out some groundwork for that, just conceptually? Like, do they have names, or is it just northeast, northeast, or northwest, or whatever?
I would suggest that would be a great question for this committee too.
Communications.
Yeah.
I like that idea, yeah. I think that's, it's hard to get people to, but yeah.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want the council to just consider it on
Yeah.
our own. It'd be great to have a committee talk about it and then have a conversation about what their recommendations are in here.
I will say one thing that came up when that came up last time, and I didn't get to talk to it, but to speak to it, but just real quickly, I think there's a little bit of a, not conflict, but there's a little bit of a semi-conflict between saying we want to find things like in the master plan, et cetera, to bring the city together, to bring the quadrants to, because they're geographically separate. And then also saying maybe the form of representation should be separate. I'm just saying there's a tension there.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
And I think if you say, oh, you have your own representative, the danger there is that person tends to think very like hyper locally as opposed to considering things. So it's always that way, but
I would love to hear a debate amongst people on this committee about that point. Because I can also see, well, how could you mitigate that?
Yeah.
Like maybe we have the block captains or whatever they're called from different segments of the city do some joint activity together, or stay in contact outside of the committee meetings, or
well, I think having captains that aren't official, like I can't argue against that in any way, but I think Rick had mentioned, do we want to, and this is more of a charter question, right? But just do we want to have council elected that way, for instance, and I'm just saying, I think, there's some dangers there as well.
Yeah.
To further fragmenting.
Yeah, I think that way back when we first started talking about block captions, the initial idea was just more on the lines of communication.
Yeah.
Try to find ways to get information out to residents. So for example, if, I know the people in my, general area more so than I know people across the other side of
Right.
11 mile. So I could talk to my neighbors, Jason could talk to his neighbors, Kelly could talk to her neighbors, and that kind of thing, so.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great point to bring up, I'm glad you
Yeah.
did. Definitely creates opportunity for tensions
Yeah.
and more fragmentation.
Right.
So, do you have what you need for that?
I think so.
Okay.
Sorry, did we set any kind of timeline for putting the word
So
out?
in my head, I realistically probably get an ad out tomorrow afternoon, knowing these general guidelines. Then, since our meeting is delayed a week, I'm gonna try to get appointments at your January 26th meeting, depending how applications come in.
Great.
Perfect.
Fast service.
Yeah. All right, I will go ahead and open it up for public comments. So residents have 3 minutes to provide their input to the council. So if anybody would like to step up to the podium, state your name and keep it going.
Hello, Station here, Bungalow Drive. Just want to talk about millages. I know Headley didn't pass, and I think there's a myriad of reasons, many of those beyond our control, national, federal issues happening with the economy, politics. But I think one of those possibly could be the sort of abstract nature of where the money was going. So I do feel like if there was a library millage and people knew exactly where their money was going, I think the community would vote for it. I think they would do the same for a safety millage, because there would be a concrete idea of where exactly the tax money would be going, not just this ephemeral, oh, we need money. So I am for putting that to the vote for the community.
Thank you.
Hello, Lillian Kaiser Lowry. Happy New Year to all of you. Just a thought in building the budget. Could we consider like a utilization? Like we talked about the library. Are people really using the library? Are people really using the chipping service? Have we done a study to see how many people are using it? That way you can determine, these 5 things, if only 20% of the people are using it, maybe this thing isn't as important. You could use SurveyMonkey. You also could use like a Google free survey to see if you don't have the answers about utilization. So just a thought.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, Jonathan Terra. I just had a brief conversation with our AV guy to verify, so I didn't make a fool of myself here. Could y'all please speak up so that we can hear you in the room? There are no speakers in this room. I understand that as of this meeting, where this is now being recorded on a cell phone, so hopefully that is, and that's gonna go to YouTube. And so hopefully that's picking up what you're saying, okay? But I have to say, the one person that I hear the least is the person that has complained the most about transparency. So John, could you speak up so that we can hear you? Because I didn't hear a word you said.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Okay?
Yep.
And that's, part of it is the U shape here, right?
Yeah.
You're at the end here, we can't hear you because you're speaking to council.
Got it.
The other thing, little communication thing, I was wondering if there is officially or unofficially a source other than the monthly meeting packets for police department activity. So I have, through a Google search, and I realize we don't do it in real time like bigger cities do, okay? Because somebody was asking me, where do I get information on police incidents? And I directed them to the website where the council meeting minutes are kept, right? But I did find copies of monthly summaries on usgovcloudapi.net, which is not the site that is used for the council packets. Of course, Google AI is dreaming and says that there is a link on the police department section of the city website that will direct you to maybe there, maybe somewhere else, but I can't find that link. But that's Google hallucinating.
You're saying that Google tells you that you can go to the police page on the
Yeah,
city's website
yeah,
and get
yeah.
access to the summary reports, but they're not
but,
there.
but Google famously in the past couple of days, not Google, but some AI recently summarized a police incident in another city, and they had to go to the courtroom before it was revealed that the police officer had turned into a frog. Because apparently there was something on the TV in the background.
That's wild.
Thanks, John. Anyone else?
Well, Diane Anderson, and I'm happy to hear the talk about the library today. I think it's important because I don't know anybody that moved to Lathrup over the years that said, I'm not going to move to a place if they don't have summer concerts. I'm not going to come here if they don't have their own MLK Day ceremony when there's one right up the road by that nonprofit in Southfield. But the library is another thing. We don't have the schools of drawing people the way they once did, but the library does. And that increases property values. And it's something when you're trying to sell a millage, I think it's important to tell people. I know the DDA pays for a lot of the parks and rec type things, but it seems to me a better use of their money would be to put it towards the library that is so important. And the Southfield Library is heads and shoulders above the local library. For example, in Birmingham, they have 280,000 books as opposed to Birmingham's 120,000 books. And they have facilities that are just unbelievable. It is just an extraordinary library, and it's a real magnet for this area. So I look at some of the things that you could share with other cities. Why do you have to have concerts here in Lathrup when they have them in Oak Park, they have them in Southfield? You're talking about a mile in either direction and people can easily go there. They don't have to be here. As I say, they have the big MLK Day ceremony, and it's a non-profit, it's not the city of Southfield, and they don't run the risk of that minister from next door coming in here. Because if you're going to have a ceremony here, you better do what the non-profit does and have an imam, a rabbi, a priest, and a minister, and a mainstream one, and not just one person. These are the kind of expenses that I know DDA is happy to look at, but they're things, they do add up. There was $19,000 spent on that idiotic Caribbean thing that was run by the then city manager's boyfriend. If you could spend $19,000 on a Caribbean day, and $25,000 is the difference between Berkeley, which is a nice library, it's what Lathrup used until we had Southfield. I've got my certificate from 1959 for reading 15 books from the Berkeley Library, but it's not a patch on Southfield Library. So if you're talking about doing silly things like $19,000 for a Caribbean day, and $25,000 is the difference between Berkeley and Southfield, it's a false economy. I really do think you have to look at not only the staffing numbers. I've been culling my files over the holidays, and I was looking at some articles I wrote for Our Town magazine 8-9 years ago, and I'm astonished at the number of people that are working in that office now, and what were on the payroll just 8-9 years ago. What has changed that you need so many more people for a city of 1.5 square miles? That certainly would be an area to cut costs. And then, as I say, have a good look at parks and recs, because there's an awful lot that you can share with other communities, and all that money from DDA could go to the library.
Thank you.
Good evening. Tim Hillman, San Quentin. Clarification question. I don't know if you'll respond. At previous meetings when we were talking about the difference between the Berkeley contract and the Southfield contract, I thought we were talking in the tune of like $100,000 difference. It sounds like today a $25,000 number has been floating around. Before I proceed with my comment, I'm curious which one is it?
I'll answer that real quickly. So we're on the hook for 1 mil, which is roughly about $190,000.
Okay.
But the Southfield Public Library has only been charging us about 119.
I see.
So that's where the 119 versus 95, 25,000.
Okay, I understand. I'll offer my perspective anyway. I really want you to consider alternative options to the Southfield contract, especially if they are, if there's cost savings associated with that. Last month and a little bit tonight, we've heard some equity arguments in favor of the Southfield Public Library, which I understand and appreciate. But I want to point out a few other things. Whereas I understand the Southfield's computer lab is larger, Berkeley does have a computer lab. And I don't know that a larger computer lab justifies the additional cost. Whereas I understand Southfield's library is closer for most, Berkeley's library is closer for some residents. And it remains very close for all residents. In fact, many Southfield residents live a lot further away from their own library than we do from the Berkeley Library. So I don't think there's a strong equity case there, especially in consideration of a potential or proposed library millage. There's a whole new equity consideration to give in terms of how much we're asking residents to pay for a library contract. Of course, cheaper seems more equitable and more fair to me. And then I'd also like to remind, I realize there's not total reciprocity between a Berkeley Public Library card and access to the Southfield Public Library, but most of the access is still there, including primary access to a library's primary function, which is its catalog of books. And so your Berkeley Public Library card will provide you access to any of the incremental thousands of books at the Southfield Public Library. So I encourage you to make an economical choice on that front. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Suzanne S. Rainbow Drive. I just wanted to say that when you're looking at cuts, I did a little dive and I'm unprepared today to share my numbers because I don't have my notebook. But I was scanning all of the line items for Giffords Webster. And I am curious, I know we have a retaining fee for our lawyer, I believe we have a retaining fee for Giffords Webster. We certainly have a lot of line items for them. And then I'm unclear on when we ask for a study to be done, how formal that is. Is there a vote to say Giffords Webster do another traffic study, do a using study? Like you mentioned, Survey Monkey, I forget what you called it.
Survey Monkey, and also Google has a Survey Monkey.
Yeah, and that is a lot more accessible and cheap compared to when we ask our planners, Giffords Webster, to do a survey on if we were using the library or not. We could really easily ask Giffords Webster to see if anyone's, and Giffords Webster will charge a couple $1,000 or more. It's amazing how much money we spend with Giffords Webster. There are planners and our engineers, and they oversee our projects, like they oversaw the sidewalk project, they oversee the paving, they oversee everything, they plan it, they design it, they oversee it, they make money at every step. And to me, that's the fact of the city. Now, I can't swear to it, I don't have the numbers, but I encourage everyone to go to the expenditures to see how many times Giffords Webster's come up and see if you think all those charges are reasonable. And I am delighted that we're gonna have a communications and engagement, and maybe that kind of survey you guys could oversee, like Survey Monkey kind of thing, to gather that information, to preclude Giffords Webster from having to get involved in that kind of thing. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, just a couple comments. Just to your comments, Diane, the DDA money can't go to the library. The library is not in the DDA district, so that money can't be spent on the library. And that the concerts are not paid for by the city. Can we, is there a possibility that we can put a link to the police reports on to Jonathan's point, on our city website? On the police page?
I'll say how easy it is to do.
Yeah.
Take a look.
Yeah, and then just with respect to Giffords Webster, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of expenses to Giffords Webster, but if we hire another firm, there's gonna be a lot of expenses to whatever that planning commission is, or a planning consultant is, or whatever that city engineer is. There's gonna be a lot of expenses because we're outsourcing those particular services.
We could insource it by hiring a person, but
With
the job,
benefits.
the amount of work that Giffords Webster does for the projects that we have hired them for is way more than can be done for one person, from my perspective, it's my opinion. And you lose the benefit of the employees of Giffords Webster and their experiences with other communities and that institutional knowledge which they bring to the projects that they do work on for us. If you just have one person as a staff member working for our city, then all they really know about is what's going on in our city.
And they have to be a generalist.
And they have to be a generalist, they can't be a subject matter expert in everything, right? So I think when we're looking at something like the cost of outsourcing planning services to a company like Giffords Webster, we have to look at the value that they deliver for the money that they are charging the city.
I think a couple of things real quick, and I would suggest, just like we looked at police and we looked at the library, it's a big ticket item. They are a big ticket item for us, and I think it would be, you know, not a bad thing for this, obviously you're looking at their expenses all the time, but for this council to maybe put it in a study session, just a review of the contract and what it entails, the fact that they actually serve several functions for us, not just one, and how that works. I think partially because I'm curious myself, I mean, I can do the research too, but also I know it's come up a lot in quarters of, and I think it would be good if we had a little bit of it just going over what is it that they do, what do we pay, et cetera, and then maybe a little bit of the discussion of, you know, is there a place to save or not? You know, you might be absolutely right, but I think it bears some discussion. The other thing, I just want, can I?
Here, go for it.
Okay. I do want to apologize for not talking louder. I think I picked the worst seat because I've been looking this way the entire time, which can't be helpful. And I just noticed everybody else is at least partially looking toward you. So I will talk louder, hopefully.
But you're the closest to the camera.
I am the closest, so I may be the loudest
We'll find
tomorrow
out.
if you watch the video. But I'm definitely, looking away, so I'm not quite sure. I'll try to do something like this, and just talk louder, so. Appreciate the note. I'm sorry you didn't make it earlier, but I know you didn't have a chance, so.
For the Lathrup Village Chamber of Commerce, tomorrow there's a networking event from 6 to 9, and it's at Smalls with a Z, handcrafted foods and cocktails, and that is at 30100 Telegraph Road, Bingham Farms. It's right next to Rusty Bucket. That should be interesting. And then there's a ribbon cutting on Wednesday from 12 to 2 at Belvisio, which is on the west side of Southfield, and it is south of 12 Mile, next to Domino's. Yeah. And it'll be upstairs. Belvisio has been in Lathrup for years, and it's I'm glad to see that there's actual ribbon cutting. It's a wonderful person who runs it.
Yeah, so I was curious about that, because, so did they remodel, or are they reopening, or?
No one's really talked to her to get her involved in anything in Lathrup.
Okay. Go Chambers. Yes.
I wanted to thank Ms. Lillian for the suggestion of looking at utilization of services and determining what should be considered for potentially cutting or right sizing. I know that we did that with the library very explicitly because it's a big ticket item that we have looked at. So we know that out of the approximately 4,000 people that live in the city, approximately 1,000 of them have library cards, right? But that's just one example, right? So chipping services, who utilizes them, great question, right? Leaf pickup services, who's utilizing them? you know, it's a good reminder for us to take a look at those things when we're considering what would be good candidates for cuts or right sizing. So thank you for that. But also, you know, when we're looking at things like MLK celebrations, concerts in the park, what have you, we need to look at utilizations of those as well. And I think the DDA does look at those, especially in context of the Lathrup Village Music Festival. It's a very highly attended event. The DDA continues to sponsor it year after year because they see value in that investment because of the very obvious increase in the number of people who are attending the event year after year. We can see that through just visually looking at the numbers of people who are here, asking the police chief for estimates on the number of people attending and the utilization of parking.
But doesn't, I mean, not to cut you off, but the majority of the pay for the Lathrup Village Music Festival is from sponsorship, isn't it?
Most of it is from sponsorships outside the DDA. The
Right.
DDA happens to be one sponsor, and it's a very good clarification. Thanks for bringing that up. And to just reiterate what you already said, Bruce, the city pays $0 for that music festival.
Right.
I believe we
And the
also pay
concerts.
$0 for the
Concerts.
MLK celebrations and
And the concerts.
Juneteenth celebrations, so.
I'd just add on to that, I think city's job is more than just operational expenses and service providing, and that we do have a function of community building, and that those concerts and other things like that have real value. Otherwise, we're just a subdivision, and then you can start looking at going back to being part of Southfield. I mean, I think we pride ourselves on being unique and separate and different, and if we don't do anything together, there's really no justification for thinking of ourselves that way, so.
Yeah, I think they're huge for community.
Yeah.
I think that's a great comment, because I think that is not accurate in saying of what we pay for, because it's the Lathrup Village Community Foundation pays for the concerts, and then for Juneteenth, which we did not do last year, nor did we do an MLK celebration last year. The DDA is what covers it, and I know from the people that I interact with on a regular basis are very excited about the concerts that come here, and it brings, you know, if we don't do something, to, you know, going off of what you're saying, we don't do something to attract people to the city, our businesses lose, our city can easily just kind of fall into place, you know, go to Southfield or go to Oak Park, and I second what you just said. Thank you.
Couple other real quick things. Mike gets mad props from Rashida Tlaib and her chief of staff, Larissa, for his responsiveness. So she mentioned something. So I just wanted to point it out publicly that they were very impressed by you. So I think that was great, and so we appreciate that.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but it was something, and I try really hard not to make comments from here, from Facebook. But I just want to clarify before I say this, is that is it not a statute for the state of Michigan, if a city's budget is not balanced by the end of the fiscal year, that the city would be fined and in violation?
We're subject to penalties from the state of Michigan.
And we've never had a penalty.
Not since I've been here, at least.
We've never had, okay, so that's your answer, and my answer is we've never had a penalty. So that means that we've never not had a balanced budget, just FYI.
Non-sequitur, but appreciate it.
Just jump on here, because I was standing next to you when
Right.
when Rashida and her
Larissa, yeah.
said that, and I just wanted, what made it more credible, I guess, is she wasn't just blowing smoke, because she said some very not
Specifics.
complimentary things about other city management people who were actually in the room. So she,
Right.
she, you know, in terms of follow through and everything, they were very impressed.
Right, and they were very specific.
Yeah, and I
so.
think that's certainly worth mentioning publicly. So.
Yeah, the other thing I just wanted to give a reminder, because the new sign ordinance is in effect now, so if we can have Steve, you know, do a 4:30 run or something, 4 o'clock run as it's getting dark. Yeah, also, oh, yeah, so in response to the $2 million cut from the state, I did send a letter off to Matt Hall. Can you send that out to council? You know, basically expressing my displeasure and what that does to a community like Lathrup, and asking for reconsideration.
I'd say that's still up in the air. They're still
Yeah.
making me submit quarterly reports, so until they stop spending that money.
Yeah.
Or spending the $500,000 they gave us.
Well, that's what Rashida said. Keep spending it, you know, because we're not gonna be able to get it back. But and I think that was it. Anybody else have anything? Lisa.
I just wanted to share for the record that we take a lot of calls from people downstairs, and a lot of people call about the different events here. They call about some Parks and Rec events. They call and ask, you know, what's going on here with our community room all the time. But we get a lot of calls about the concerts on Wednesday nights. And people have actually planned their whole vacation times around coming to our concerts and bringing their family and friends together. And they, it's like a respectful thing for us that we have them, because they kind of like our smaller atmosphere than having to be over at our big sister city and get lost in a huge crowd. They think of it more intimate, and then they start looking at it and they go, they think Lathrup Village is pretty cool because they like our park, and then they look at our community room and renting it. And so it does have some value in what we have heard from people, just sharing what I've heard from folks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, if nothing else, we'll adjourn.